don't see, oh, sorry, I'll wait for that. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. I don't see any members of the public in attendance. Anybody sign up? Nope. All right. So on to unfinished business. Emily, do you want to do an introduction here? Although we've met Stephen many times.
Sure, and he really needs no introduction.
That's right.
But yeah, thank you, EDA directors, for accommodating a special, an additional meeting to the calendar of meetings. We are excited to have not the pressure of time to be able to spend some time today with Stephen Pedigo with Civic Soul, as well as some guest presenters that he's invited to attend today. John Provo with Virginia Tech, and Margette Upshur with Lynchburg. And really, I'll just, this is the study work, the implementation work that the EDA really valued, kind of coming out of the Economic Development Strategic Plan process, and asked for sort of a follow-on exercise. We've had to move this a couple times for scheduling, but we're really excited to have Stephen back to lead us through some presentation and also some discussion later. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Okay, y'all, let's so the last time we met with you guys, we were in all these technology challenges, but so now we're all virtual, so hopefully we won't have those. I'm also reminded that it wasn't my fault the last time. So I initially thought it was my recording, but I think it was the city's AV equipment. So that made me actually feel a little bit better about that. So let's do this. Let's just orient ourselves on the work and the kind of the purpose of today. So I've got a really quick agenda that I will pull up. Just one moment. There it is. Okay, so let's talk about the work. So as you guys know, this was part of a two pieces of the engagement. So part of the big piece of the project, I've been working with Emily and Ashley and Saboon and Avery and the team to really work through a business plan as it relates to the economic development strategy. So we took the economic development strategy, we've put that into a really good operating plan and a business plan for the next 18 months, into 3 years actually. And I believe Emily we plan to include that in the next EDA packet for you guys to have. So we've got some minor things that we're doing in terms of tweaking and putting some final metrics on that, but that work really is done. And I think it's been a pretty successful initiative in terms of being able to streamline the work and really organize the work around core services that the department was working on. The second part of the session was just work with you guys, and that was to start to think about how you all could support the work for the strategic plan, and so what would be investment priorities and how you would think about the role of the EDA. Now, the EDA in Albemarle has been around for a while, but there's an opportunity for us to spend some time just going through and a little bit of education to understand how EDAs are working across the Commonwealth, as well as looking at some best practices. So that's really what this session has been designed to do. So we've got about 2 hours today. What we'll do is we'll spend the first hour of conversation kind of in a learning mode. And then we'll spend the rest of the session. We'll take a small break. We'll come back. We'll spend most of the second part of the session in a bit of a facilitated discussion. So a little bit about purpose, and then we'll jump into a presentation from my friend John Provo, who is with Virginia Tech, that's going to talk about the role of EDA boards across Virginia, so best practices and trends that he sees. So we're really lucky to have John here, and I appreciate him jumping in on this. As soon as John is done, he's going to make a few remarks. He's got some slides he'll share, and then we'll open it up for Q&As for questions that y'all may have. And then one of the things that we wanted to do is just think through what's an EDA board that's been pretty active and effective in the work that they're doing. And Lynchburg is one that I've worked with quite a bit. Margette Upshur is the director of that group of the Economic Development Department there in Lynchburg. It's just a very active EDA board. They've done a lot of investment recently in terms of buying property and doing site development and all those types of things. And so I invited her, and she's going to join us today to talk a little bit about what they're doing. We're going to run that really as a Q&A discussion where she can just answer questions that I have, and hopefully you all will have some questions for her as well. From there, we'll take a break. And then, as I said before, come back, talk a little bit about investment framework, and facilitate a discussion around that. And hopefully, there'll be a robust discussion, and that will lead us to being able to start to put together a framework for that going forward. Any questions about how we'll spend the 2 hours together?
No, Stephen, why don't you I'll just let you sort of call on people so we're not, I'll flag people if I need to, but I'll let you plan on just sort
I
of
will be the
running that.
facilitator. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
So, Don, I am happy to assume the role of chair.
All right.
Um,
Nobody else is willing to do it but
Grab if
me.
I've
I'm
ever
glad
seen
somebody
one.
else has.
yeah. Okay. No worries. So just to remember, kind of what purpose of today is, really is, as I said before, we want to understand the role of this, what's the role that the EDA can provide. We want to have an opportunity to kind of learn from some statewide peers, and then start to develop a lens for maybe how we think about the work going forward, and then finally identify some next steps at the end of this as well. So that's really what we'll spend some time doing today. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides, my screen, because I know John Provo, who is with us, has some slides of his own. And John is here. He was here. There he is. I see him.
There I am. Sorry.
So John, you should be able to share your slides. And thanks for joining us. I think everyone here really appreciates it and appreciates the work that you do across the Commonwealth as well at Virginia Tech to support a lot of the communities doing economic development work.
Well, Stephen, you know, someone from Blacksburg and Virginia Tech never refuses an opportunity to, come this close to UVA. So, and to be Margette, and I don't know if y'all understand, being Margette Upsher's warm-up act, it's a tremendous honor because Margette is just top of the top of the top. So let me
She's a
let me pull
legend.
these slides up, and I will tell you, if you don't mind, just a little bit of context. Or I always do this wrong. Are you getting my?
We're getting the presenter view. Yeah, we're seeing it all.
Yeah, wait a minute. I'm just going to do it this way because I'll be the one having technological problems today. How about that?
We can,
So
perfect.
okay, perfect. Well, listen, thanks for the time. Just to give you a little quick context about, why I do what I do. I run essentially a university engagement center within Virginia Tech. Um, every university has a different version of this. Some of you may know Pace Lochte, I think, who's at UVA, and her role is nestled within the executive suite and has a lot of sort of special project assignments related to economic development. Ours layers in a little bit more like, the extension mission of the university. So we're really here to be a multiplier on impact. Ut Prosum, if you haven't listened to someone from Virginia Tech, that's our little Latin phrase about that I may serve. And really, all universities are certainly trying to do service. We think we've got it embedded in the land grant DNA, but what I try to do is add as much value add as I can in my work with communities, companies, and agencies, either from within my team or from different assets I can bring together around Virginia Tech. And I'm often happy to put those folks together with, partners around the state. And really for us, this economic and community engagement is about pathways to prosperity. Every region of the state has a way forward, even if it's not always obvious to every community in every region. And we're always super happy when we can help folks get down a road somewhere. There's about 24 folks on my team. We are mostly down in Blacksburg, but I've got offices in Roanoke, Abingdon, also in Arlington and Newport News. We work on projects like regional transformation. So we're working with some federal and state funding right now to accelerate adoption of additive manufacturing and novel materials technologies in a footprint from Blacksburg through Roanoke and Lynchburg down past Danville. And community innovation, we've got a program we call Vibrant Virginia, where we're out co-partnering with community foundations looking to imagine kind of what's next in their roles and in their places. I don't know if a lot of folks may not know Covington. It's a old mill town just north of Roanoke. It's the last stop before you get to West Virginia. And they are partnering with us. We're helping them launch a new Allegheny Thrives organization that we've been working with them to kind of develop for a few years. And essentially, they're going to co-fund a position we're going to put in the community on the ground with them. We do a range of technical studies. We just finished a national study for the Appalachian Regional Commission on their investments in the outdoor economy over the last 10 years. A lot of different things come up in workforce. We've been involved with the university in some ways to help accelerate internship development and connections for students and companies. We just finished a multi-year program with some support from Go Virginia related aquaculture education in Hampton Roads that's embedded a lot of stuff within our communities. And I guess I'm sort of beginning to hopefully stack the idea that there's a lot of different stuff that comes into economic development really everywhere in the state. I think I missed the slide. Hang on. Oop, excuse me. This is not the best way to do this, is it? There we go. I know a couple of folks from the county have taken advantage of this before. We also have an educational partnership with the Virginia Economic Developers Association. We do an annual conference for folks who are new to the profession. And what struck me the last time we did this a few months ago, there were people from the place we typically see people, which is, towns, counties, regions in economic development and state agencies like VDP. But there were folks there from special agencies focused on defense transition, agriculture, small business groups. There were nonprofits and developers there. So that's a little different. I've been here about 20 years now, and it used to just be great folks like Emily and her team and maybe some folks from the state, and that was about it. It's really cool how the team sport of economic development has grown to encompass a lot of allied parts at this point, I guess. We also do another course for bodies like yours. I think that one is, I'll say, I always feel really pleased when we can connect either through the course or through any kind of opportunity to speak or partner with. You all are doing something that is not always recognized, right? I mean, at this point, there's about 120 plus industrial or economic development authorities around the state. I have to say plus because nobody really keeps a list. We try to do this through this effort with VITA. There are cities, counties, and towns, and some multiple jurisdiction EDAs and IDAs set up who are, doing just incredibly important work, but are, maybe understudied is one way to think about it. But also, you value, Emily clearly values this group, but, not every community really has the same relationship with folks in your position. So all of this is by way of saying what you're doing is very important. And a hat tip to you for your service and all that you want to do for your community. So why is this a story we're talking about? Virginia 60 years ago was a very different place. Agriculture, manufacturing of a very traditional heavy sort of nature. That really sort of dominated things. That traditional growth led to these bodies being created, really for the kind of the same reasons that drive you today. But the pieces and parts you were trying to put together were very very different. I freaked out one of my students earlier this week talking about the agricultural past in Fairfax County, and they were like, "Wait, what?" So I do think these bodies have been a part of this effort to make Virginia the best state for economic development in a long time. You are, a new model in an EDA. The main difference is in the name, but it also represents kind of a broader vision. This was something that was added a number of years ago. As I said, this doesn't get as much notice, but I know there's a bill currently looking at maybe some changes to notice requirements that you guys, I'm sure, are studying carefully. A few years ago, there was some back and forth too about additional conflict of interest things. All this is to say, even if you're not making headlines every day, you've been a part of the machinery of Virginia economic development for a tremendously long time. And I think, the other thing to think about here, we still have manufacturing, but now we're manufacturing in life sciences, as you guys are going to get to play with for the next few years, right? The biopharma boom of the last little bit here has been quite something to watch. I also think, I was looking back and depending on how you run the numbers, I mean, we were about a 25% defense economy in this period when the IDAs were created. We're about that now. And we're actually a little bit higher in overall Fed as we've wrestled with since, over the last year, right? So I think, again, the history isn't always well told, but you're a part of that history. And I think, it's great that you're taking on this, very intentional process with Steve. And I think, more groups should do that. What are the best groups doing? High impact EDAs. I wrestled with this a little bit because, in some respects, when you do something like this, it's good to talk with you about places that look like you. There aren't that many places, frankly, that look quite like you. The mix of things you have in the county and proximity to certain things. I know you've looked at certain projects in Chesterfield. Certainly their redevelopment, commercial redevelopment activities. My team has actually spent the last 9 months or so doing a kind of a deep dive study for Chesterfield and its own planning and operations relative to economic development. And what kind of snuck up on me was how their EDA was really an active part of every project that you can read about there. And this is a county, I actually did my master's and lived for a number of years in Richmond, did my master's at VCU. It was still, rooftops and ag pretty much, right? Sorry, I didn't say how old I am. So that would be like in the 90s, way long ago. And, the growth of manufacturing in that community, the careful placement of data centers in particular areas, and the ability to channel growth into some very big corridors. The EDA's played an important role, not just as a bonding agency, but also there are a couple examples where they essentially land banked some things that helped the county phase in future development. And so I think that one is you almost have to like live in that one to kind of get a feel for it. But there are a few other examples that I wanted to lift up for you about how these connections work, where you can see things maybe in a more linear sort of fashion. So Botetourt County is a rural county, literally just outside of Roanoke. Botetourt, was a number of years ago wise enough to set aside a pretty large industrial park for the size county they are. And it did what those things do, and it sat, underutilized for a while. But as things are picking up pace, I think I was meeting with a guy named Gary LaRue, who is the county administrator. He's been around Virginia economic development for a while, worked in local government in a number of roles. Gary got there just after his predecessor had announced a string of new jobs. And again, for a county as rural as Botetourt, we're talking, 800 or 900 jobs over 2 or 3 projects that we're all phasing into this industrial park, and housing is a thing. I guess I'm going to say this more than once today, but housing is, critical economic development infrastructure. They had nothing. They had nothing. And so, Gary was, I think, really an early deep diver in that part of the state in terms of pursuing and working with the toolbox that his EDA offered to pursue additional retail development. And there's a power center that would look not dissimilar to things that you might see in more urban parts of Virginia. That's really just down the street from this industrial park. They are also now famously, I think this is the first big data center west of you, perhaps, is coming in from Google into this Greenfield Park. They are, I think, pretty, chuffed up about this. They're very, very proud of the landing, but they're also wrestling with a lot of things around, surety around the water. The Roanoke region, which Botetourt's a member of their water authority. They have a wonderful resource that they put together collectively a number of years ago, and they've developed some, I think some projects to make all the regional partners happy with that. They're also getting the data center, which will be located in the industrial park, and thus, not too close to any neighbors who will be bothered. But they've also got the first onshore wind farm coming up in Virginia, in Botetourt County, I think from a Charlottesville-based or a Charlottesville-affiliated company called Apex. So all of these things, again, flow from filling and servicing this particular industrial park, or the logical flow of, resources and non-traditional infrastructure like housing that has to be a part of something like that. Pulaski County, just down the road from me, it's home to the largest truck manufacturing facility that Volvo runs in North America. 40 by 30 is their whole economic development strategy. While they make a nice, living off of Volvo and the suppliers in terms of, machine and tools tax and the like, they are really, really, really pressing the button on population growth. It's really the only community in the New River Valley, I think, that wants to grow. And they've got, what they've done is, they had an incredible backlog of old industrial buildings and a couple of older sites. Like my whole time here, that was their whole, we've got to fill all these buildings, many of which date back to, sort of a mill and mine kind of economy. But they had a really big sort of 70s-ish vacant AT&T facility, maybe 80s, early 80s, something like that. And they just said, the heck with it, we're not moving this. So they actually flipped that into a housing development. It was well served by utilities. The impact on the surrounding neighbors was generally not a problem. But again, the IDA is undergirding all of this stuff. IDA, they're super active. They've actually got run some other programs, and that are also not traditional industrial development around small business and things like that. And one of the most comprehensive ones, I hadn't really tracked this, but as I was trying to pull some examples together, Newport News, which has been a great partner to our university. I mentioned we have an office there. They have we actually had built, we occupy and manage a developer-built industrial park adjacent to the DOE's, Federal Department of Energy's Jefferson National Lab there, and also down the road from NASA in Hampton. And that's, a burgeoning sort of opportunity for us. It's our second research park. We've got one here in Blacksburg, and they've been able to layer in a lot of things related to infrastructure for us to get off the ground there. There's a whole live, work, play development that really represented an upgrade for retail and housing options that they really wanted in that community. but it's a funny geography, right? And it's one of those cities in Hampton Roads that was sort of pieced together in part in the 60s through mergers and acquisitions, essentially, back when we used to do annexation in Virginia. But Newport News goes all the way from the shipyards up into essentially suburban areas on the way to Williamsburg. And so consequently, they've got a really weird mix match of development patterns and such. And this was an effort, again, undergirded and spearheaded by their EDA to work a package of projects really all over their city. And much as you're developing a framework, I mean, they set some priorities and but they wanted to do it in a way for them that uplifted all parts of their geography. So I think I already alluded to unique opportunities and challenges, but folks may know Fauquier County. It's another place with horses. But Vid Hill was actually an old Army Signal Corps facility that was given up during BRAC back in the end of the last century, I think. And it was set up, they set up an EDA around the redevelopment of this facility. And if you go in there, if you've ever had a chance to sort of drive through there, there's a neat mix of some aerospace companies and some other things that, but it doesn't look oppressively industrial. They did a really, neat job, I think, of embedding a lot of jobs in a footprint that sort of blends nicely for that community. And along with that, they've built some commercial and housing to kind of service it. I was actually at breakfast this morning with the Montgomery County Economic Development Director. We did a Chamber of Commerce panel together, and I told him I was going to talk about him. And he was certainly pleased by that. But a couple of things that we focused in on and that I wanted to lift up for you here is the role that the EDA there has played in helping pull things out of the university into the community, essentially. So we do have a reasonably successful corporate park that's owned by the University Foundation. Ours is literally cheek and jowl adjacent to the campus. So that doesn't feel like it's out in the community to a lot of folks. We've had a couple of companies come through there, and the mantra there is about lab coats, right? But a couple of companies, one called Torque, which actually was a student company that began for some DARPA challenges. They do autonomous systems for trucks. And they were actually not long ago bought by sort of acquired in a 50-50 deal with Daimler. Their growth definitely was not a fit for the park anymore. And they've put two different expansions out in county-owned land that the EDA was able to help them produce. And then, we also have a very, very large, actually the single largest research group on our university is our Transportation Institute. There's a lot of interesting ways public money with EDA help has been layered in there. There's actually, somewhere on a drawing board somewhere, there's a plan that would get their test road all the way down to Roanoke. We've never found that much money, but we've built out piece after piece. The last bit was a large rural expansion into Montgomery County that was accomplished with about a 3 or 4 party deal that would not have come together without the EDA, its authority and resources kind of undergirding the transaction that allowed us to dramatically expand the testing facilities there. And they work with cars, they work a lot with trucks. They've got a lot of simulation, like not just computer simulation, but they can simulate various weather types. They needed some different terrain though. So this was a critical opportunity for that we needed for this test group. And again, the county was able to play a great role through its CDA. I mentioned another example where a deal with a company didn't work. Scott County in the last year through its EDA, this is all the way in far southwest Virginia. Scott County is, it's not the last, but it's kind of the next to last before you get to that pointy part down at the bottom end of the state. They, believe it or not, everybody's got housing problems, right? Scott County was trying to service or was trying to resell a call center that had become a little redundant for the company that ran it. There's been a lot of changes in that industry post COVID for sure, and it's not. It wasn't giving up. It was like, okay, what's a different use we could do if we're not able to market it for anything that it was built for, right? That whole market had changed for them, and again, there had not been new housing built in any number in that community. Ones and twosies, was it, right? So they're moving forward on a mixed use community. There's age-based housing. There's a whole mix of things that are very, very specific niche needs. And again, it was this, unique opportunity forced on them by changes in this industry to find some new use for this property. And again, none of these things would have happened without creative, committed people in these EDA groups. And I think the last, really thing I wanted to talk about is the
Hey, John, can I ask?
working closely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, sure. You had good momentum. I didn't want to break your momentum. Sorry,
No,
but
no. I should have said just be
no,
loud
no,
and jump.
yeah. Would you mind going back to the Botetourt experience?
Yeah, let's talk about Botetourt.
Yeah, I'd like to get smart on kind of the machinations of a data center. And so Google comes to Botetourt County. What is the bang for the buck for the county to, undertake something like that? How many
Yeah.
jobs? What's the economic so what?
So
They're kind of
I
verboten here, so I don't know why. I don't have an agenda. I just like to learn about
Sure.
it. I don't know why people.
a county would do that.
Yeah, and I maybe there's not that many jobs that are yielded. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a couple ways to think about this. I mean, jobs are important. There are certainly more upfront construction jobs than there are
Yeah,
long-term.
sure.
And I should also say this has only been a land deal so far. They're like on the edge of being able to release and go public on some of the plan details. I think a few things about building site and such has slipped out. Trevor, did you want to follow this one, or did you want to add a point before I finish answering that one?
It's related to the question
Yeah,
from
please.
Mr. Harden.
Yeah.
Steve, when we did our analysis and worked through the past year, Emily and community development and the attorney's office related to potential ordinances related to data centers, I will say from a local government perspective, Emily can speak to the economic development side of it, but from a local government revenue perspective, you've heard our cost for services study, right? Every dollar that we get in tax for single family homes, it costs the county like $1.37 in services, right? So it's a lost leader in when houses come, the cost to serve is more expensive than the revenues. Our economic development strategic plan has really leaned into commercial because for every dollar of commercial, it's somewhere in around 35 to 37 cents of cost for services. Data centers, that ratio is somewhere on the order of for every dollar of revenues from a data center, it's around 17, 15 cents for a cost for service. And so just purely from a revenue generator perspective, it adds a boon to the economy, and it doesn't come with hundreds of employees and school capacity concerns and things like that. I think that was your question, kind of why what's all the interest from localities. In part, it's for the revenues without having significant impacts to infrastructure from a local government perspective. Where you sit from kind of climate action and and a utility, electrical impact, things like that. That's a different lens, but hopefully that helps. And Emily, clean anything up
It
that
just
if
seems
I
like they're being built
misrepresented it.
everywhere. I understand Louisa has one, maybe two, and they're going to go somewhere. So
Well, yeah, and I mean, I guess where I was going to land on this is that the bottom line is very situational. In
sure.
their case, certainly the fiscal impact, great. They're wrestling with some of the details about the water. They looked into, also happening to have this green energy provider coming up, which was appealing for sure to Google. Um, the job thing, there's another aspect of this though, and Google's also announced in Chesterfield at some of the sites I referenced there. Um, they, Chesterfield has enough of these that they are also seeing like a specialized services develop around this. And in a place like Chesterfield, that's kind of interesting because a lot of what that is sort of trades related that helps them with their manufacturing industry, which again may or may not be the calculus for the bigger picture here. But I definitely think, there's a revenue argument, but you got to look carefully at these other utility things, as Trevor said. I think the other thing is like the siding with your community, right? And I don't want to go too deeper because I bet you're going to have a whole much more fun on this and I'm almost done. But just last thought about this is the beauty of this one is it was banked in an industrial park where not only did they have the idea about the utilities and the power, but they didn't have a bunch of neighbors to annoy, right? And that's not always the case in some of these other communities. Stephen, there was another hand up from Andrew if we wanted to do that, but you're the moderator. I'm just the guest at this point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing to the
Uh,
group there. I
oh,
jumped in the ch I dropped in the chat today. It's interesting you brought up a question about data centers. Brand new Brookings study out today about data
right.
centers. I put the link in the chat, and they've actually got some great look about the multiplier of job effects, what it means in terms of power and energy. But they did some of this, and it's fairly robust in the fact they've actually mapped even all the data centers across a lot of the data centers across the country, and you can look to see what's actually been happening in Virginia as well. So just wanted to say that to build off of John's that I'm glad it's coming up today because there's a great resource for it.
What a timely thing. Andrew, what did you have to
Yeah,
offer there?
I was gonna add a real world. I think at Culpeper they've done like the technology
Mhm.
corridor
Yeah.
overlay, and I think I don't remember what the exact timeline is, but I think by the time that their technology corridor is completely built out, they estimate they'll bring in, I think it was something like 20% more than their current overall budget just from the data center tax revenue. So like and they are going hyperscale in a big way, condensing it. They're limiting it to that area, but it definitely shows the impact that it can have.
Yep. Yep. So let me cycle back a couple more down here. Structure is a big deal. I mean, strategically, you should be integrated with the county's efforts and everybody, team sport, we're all playing together. That doesn't have to represent, formal structures like some of these groups have. So Henrico, for example, their EDA, that's the front door, I don't know the whole history behind that, but in other places, Chesterfield staffs the EDA and it's run hand in glove for sure. But I think those are examples of, very, very well-resourced developed counties that have definitely integrated one way or another their efforts tightly. And that means also that the board itself has good solid structure set up staffing wise, so that you're not having to guess about a lot of things. Um, I mentioned some of these are multi-jurisdictional, and not to suggest anything there, but even just joint meetings, Bedford, I didn't list here, but Bedford town and county both have IDAs, and they have a regular schedule of joint meetings where they do some discussions. I've got a similar thing going on. It's the IDA is a part of it, but the folks who do economic development in Culpeper town and county actually have us up working on a project related to some downtown redevelopment stuff. Wisville, it's formally structured between the county and the two towns. All of this staffing thing is super important. The integration with the board is super important because every now and again we get one of these that goes kind of sideways, and that's not going to be you. But I know it's a pain when you look at like new things coming down from the state that may require some more hoops or whatever. But every few years we get one of these that ends up with some negative headlines. And the most recent was in Front Royal Warren, where there was an embezzlement scandal, really that rolled up a lot of folks. And I only offer that. It shouldn't have been the last thing I offered in my deck here, but I think it is. But I only offer that to suggest that again, what you do is super important. I'm a planner by training. I don't think I mentioned that. So I love planning commissions. And if any of you are involved in that, that's important too. There's a whole lot of structure and legal requirements around what planning commissions do. You guys run way more under the radar. And I think sometimes that's helpful in sort of speed to market, but sometimes, these tripwires help us not get in trouble. But you're going to do great things. And I think that was my whole deck. So I will stop sharing. And I think I almost got you to Margette's arrival. But Stephen, Margette is there. All right. Did they tell you how excited I was, Margette, to be your warm-up act? Well, I'll hail the queen of this business. But I'd be happy to take a quick question or comment, or just cede the floor. I'll ask your moderator to jump back in and take us where we will from here.
So we've got time to do a couple questions for John, not about data centers, but maybe John, I'll start with the first question, right, and then maybe others can jump in. And that is, this group is trying to think about a framework for how it should prioritize the types of investments it's making. As was mentioned before, the economic development plan really centers on commercial development and some particularly support of the target sectors, defense work, national security work, life sciences, spunning out of the innovation out of the University of Virginia, et cetera. We're not doing a lot around housing. And data centers were absolutely a no-no as we went through our planning process. Although you all should read that study, it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So that to say is that if you were advising this group to think about priorities, things that an EDA should be doing to support an economic development strategy, what would those be? What would be some guiding principles for us?
Well, I think a focus on commercial redevelopment is great, particularly if that's the bigger gap that you've identified alongside the county, right? I think that making sure you've got to look to the market, but I think all those drivers you just mentioned, getting as much inside where that's going to land in the county, how that's going to affect your customer base, I think is critical. I think if you go back to what I underlined about the code, your job really starts with jobs in a sense, right? So you're going to focus on this commercial piece, but it's because, as Stephen sort of suggested, these new economic drivers are going to change what you've got to be able to provide in your county. So I think that's job one. You can't go wrong if you don't think about those primary jobs and how the retail development in your community needs to change to keep up with that.
Okay. Other questions for John that you may have?
All right.
Anyone? Okay, John, you're off the hook, my friend. Thanks. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all, and have fun with Margette, and and have fun with Stephen. It's good when we actually get him in Virginia. It's always a pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, friends. Thanks so much, John. Okay, we're now going to move into a discussion with Margette. Margette Upshur is here. Blue screen. She's on brand as well. With her LYH Loves You campaign. Margette has been longtime economic development director in Lynchburg, Virginia. She'll tell you how long she's been there, but I've known Margette for a really long time. She and I have probably worked together now for over a decade, supporting a lot of the economic development efforts in Lynchburg. They too have went through a strategic planning process. We've revised that strategic planning process. I think we're in revisions of a second or third round of that in terms of our unified brand work, unified plan work. They've done a lot of work around centering out a marketing and comm strategy, a brand strategy for the city. In fact, the EDA actually funded a lot of that work. And so I just thought that Margette would be great for you guys. Personally, she's a dear friend. And so I just thought it would be great for you guys to hear from some of the things that she's done with her EDA, because I just think they have been quite creative and thinking outside of the box and some of the things that they're doing. And like you, they face some challenges. They've got challenges in terms of site readiness, commercial sites, land availability, and all those types of things. So with that, Margette, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for
So Margette,
having me.
yeah, great to be here. Margette, tell us a little bit about maybe talk a little bit about just to help set this the stage for this group. Talk a little bit maybe about some of the priorities that you and the department have right now and what you guys are doing to kind of further economic development in the city of Lynchburg, and then we'll get into the EDA questions.
Okay. Well, as Stephen says, we've worked together for quite some time. I'm originally from Lynchburg, but I left and never thought I would come back, as I'm sure many of us say over time. But I did. I worked in the private sector. And so I came back here and I've been the economic development director for 20 years now. And we've seen a lot of iterations over time. One thing I will tell you as I was doing my homework is that the EDA here was established in 1967. There was
Wow.
no Office of Economic Development when that board came together. And I think that as we've gone along, I think it really adds some depth to how the EDA operates now and some of the challenges that I faced when I came on board with the EDA here. So, as Stephen says, Stephen's been an integral part of having me think a lot bigger than the box I've been given. I'm a little cheeky anyway, but he helps me to take that to the next level. I'd rather ask forgiveness than permission sometimes. But there were a lot of fundamental things that, I mean, being a city in the Commonwealth, you're not in a county. So I'm a really old city and I don't have a lot of greenfield space. So to try and engage your council when they've got the schools knocking at the door, when they've got public safety, which is the absolute most important thing in the world, they say, is how do you carve out money? How do you take property off the tax rolls, to hold that property for the jobs that we're all looking for and talking about, for when the cycles come in your economy and the way you have to reposition yourself with all of that. So I will just tell you, and I don't know whether I'm proud or whether I'm embarrassed. So either one of those I can handle. But with Stephen's prodding, I've got my first large CIP project in the budget in almost the whole time I've been here. Now, Lynchburg's not flat, so you about have to be a mountain goat to come over some of this terrain, which makes it very expensive, but it doesn't matter because I'm surrounded by 4 rural counties and their greenfield space, right? They will eat. Lynchburg's been the employment center for as long as I can remember, but they have greenfield space. And back to that whole data center conversation, I'll just weigh in on that from what John Provost said, and that is just be very deliberate and intentional. When you do anything, think about it ahead of time and where it needs to go so that your citizens, so that everybody involved has a good experience and you can take that tax revenue and plow it back in for things that benefit your citizens, but also can allow you to continue to compete, on an international scale.
So Margette, as you've thought about the work, so thank you for that. As you've thought about the work that you have done, obviously you've got your staff and the work that the city does. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance what the city does invest in and what the EDA invests in. I mean, I think for us in Virginia, that's all, I think that's a question that this group has. Like, what should the county be investing in for the Board of Supervisors perspective? And then what should the EDA be doing? And I'd love for you to just kind of help us unpack that as it relates to the city of Lynchburg. So to the question is, what are city-based investments, and how do you think about the city's role, and how do you think about the EDA's role in balancing these two?
And I have a little different situation here, because obviously, if the EDA here was started in 1967, they were around for a lot longer than there was staff available to them. So I would imagine that they were business people that were appointed, and that the city manager was their liaison when they met and when they did anything. So over time, when I first got here, I didn't even get a seat at the table, right? That's probably a woman thing, but whatever. I didn't get a seat at the table, and they had their own attorney, not the city's attorney, and they had their own CPA firm, not just the city financial and accounting. So I'm saying all that to you because of some of what I heard the end of John Provost, and that's each EDA is the sum of its experiences, or the sum of its city's experiences, and it's whether or not you step outside that box in best principles for economic development and engage a consultant or engage somebody, because an EDA, to me, is the most valuable asset that a city has. You are there, right, to look at everything across the board, not politically, but in the best interest of the citizens, but also in the best interest of economic development and the business community. You are there to understand confidentiality when you're talking about a deal. You are there to make sure you have policies that allow your staff, whether they be paid from the outside or their city staff, to move freely about the cabin and be able to talk to prospects and existing businesses about how we can help them. It is a really important piece that I think in the past, a lot of EDAs were there as a conduit. And therefore, when the city manager or when council needed something done, you could go through the EDA, because the EDA can buy, sell property, they can lease property, they can build buildings, they can issue bonds, they can do all kinds of things in an apolitical way, hopefully, that council, you defray those kind of questions from them. And I would hope that they treat you as the asset that you are. I have not always experienced that. I've had plenty of council members who had no idea what the EDA was and did not appreciate that. So I will tell you from a funding perspective, that for us, we did not necessarily have a lot of incentive, like and a tax abatement types of rules in there for like machinery and tools or real estate. Some of those things where no money has to change hands. But when you bring in a business that you've already clearly identified in your policies, going to have a certain amount of jobs, paying at a certain rate, going to have machinery and tools, going to have real estate, all of the things, then they can avail themselves of these incentives or tools that you've put in place. In my case, being 1967 all the way through, my EDA did whatever the city needed them to do, which in many cases was to go out and we did a annexation, which is still looked at as the Civil War. People still get up in arms about it, and they can have a conversation with you about how horrible it was. We did that to bring some land into the city from a manufacturing perspective. But we bought property when it was needed for a prospect, and we were embedded with lead generation coming only from VEDP. And I don't know about y'all, but thank you very much, but you've got a whole state to cover there, and I need a little bit more depth than that. and I need a little bit more policy and things for my EDA to respond to. So when I got here, they depended solely on VEDP, and we all know that once you get past Richmond, the rest of us just fell off the face of the earth, especially Lynchburg and the rest of them, right? I mean, they'll throw you a bone every now and then, but I can count on both hands the number of prospects I've had from VEDP that were a bona fide prospect. And if you don't get prospects, your city council and your EDA doesn't know how to respond to them. They need the experience of having a competitive proposal put in front of them that you go through and calculate what the ROI is on that in order to move forward and in order to lay a baseline. So my EDA ended up with, over all those years, a pot of money. When the bottom, right when I came, and the bottom fell out of the economy, the EDA has not received any money from city council to do their work in 20 years. They've used the money that they've been incredibly good stewards of over time, like buying buildings, selling buildings. They've done just about everything that an EDA can do. They paid for the brand. We had no brand at the city of Lynchburg. We had a seal. I see you got one. But we didn't have a brand. It didn't speak to you. It didn't do anything. Stephen busted my chops for years. He goes, "You got no identity. You're trying to do all of these things. You need a brand." So when I came out of COVID, I got 75 business people in a room, and we brought it together, and this was the brand that we came up with, because they asked me personally to help them sell the city to talent when I don't have the headquarters here, to their home offices, to all of that. Plus, I've got 5 colleges and universities here. I'm selling the city to parents. I'm selling the city to professors. I'm selling the city to students. So that over time, if there were risks to be taken, and risk only means what haven't you done and what aren't you comfortable doing, right? It wasn't a real risk because we do an ROI on absolutely everything. But over time, while I've been here, we've gotten a strategic plan. We've gotten 2. Stephen's right. We're probably on the 3rd iteration. And, the unbelievable thing about Stephen for us is that he's worn all the hats. He is teaching economic development to the next generation as we speak. He is practicing economic development, placemaking, all the things. When I came in, if I said the word placemaker, it was bad enough that I was a woman. But if I started talking about placemaking, that was like the kiss of death. They go, "Oh, here we go. She's going to want to put up flower baskets." Well, hell yeah, I wanted to put up flower baskets because that's what draws people to your community. Everything that I do for a visitor or for talent or for any of that goes back to my residents, like a triple bottom line. Wake up.
So Margette, you guys can see Margette's fired up and she's very passionate about the work that she does. She's fun to work with.
Or
so it
you
sounds
want to put a muzzle.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds to me, Margette, that the things that, as you have thought about and utilized your EDA, the places where the EDA in Lynchburg has come into role play is to be some of those game-changing investment, to solve the opportunity to be some of the game-changing investments, right? So when the city didn't have the resources to make the investments and or there wasn't political leadership to make that type of investment, the EDA has stepped up to be the representation of the business community. I think that's a really foundational point about a role of an EDA, right? It plays that role and that potentially that conduit between what the jurisdiction needs, in this case, what the county needs, but also the representation of the business community. I guess just 2 more questions for you, and then I want to let other people ask if they've got questions to you. As you're thinking about bringing investments to your board, how do you think about them in sense of how do you help your EDA board make investment decisions? Do you guys have a framework in place? Do you talk to us a little bit about that framework?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a good idea to think about like you're doing today, to think about what potentially you want to be intentional about going after, because I think that's really important. You don't want to swing at everything. Like I remember telling them, I go, we just stand in the background with the catcher's mitt and take anything VEDP will throw us. We want jobs. We want high quality jobs, right? We want to be able to have housing for the people so they don't have to live in another county just to work here. There's lots and lots of pieces to all of this. So sometimes these things can get really political. I have a lot of respect for council and boards of supervisors. They have to know a lot of things. But the EDA has always been for me, a place where, number one, I help them help me by setting policy, whether it's incentive policy, whether it's investment policy over the money that they hold, what their charge is, what is their mission statement, what are the things that they are there to do. And hopefully that is in alignment with your board of supervisors or your city council. But the EDA for me has we didn't have a website. I mean, if a prospect's looking for you and they have to look up under the trash tags to find you on the damn city website, not cool. It doesn't look the same way. To a citizen coming in there, go out and look yourself, right? Go out there and look at where you have to go and find most economic development organizations if they're not regional in nature, and that's your money too. You're paying them. I'm just saying you need to have something that grabs people's attention and can be a resource, right?
Mhm.
So they did the website, they paid for the strategic plan. I mean, when the money dried up and all of staff got no raises in Lynchburg for like 10 years, they did everything. There would have been no economic development if it hadn't been for the EDA. But I cherish them. I know that sounds really, you know, that sounds like a lot, but I really do, because I know how important they are. They keep confidences on things, and I want them to feel comfortable doing that. I don't want them to feel like that the things that they are doing, they do where there's no protection there for them. So that's why a policy is really important. They know when I bring something to them, they can at any time vote on something that is outside of the policy. But they have a policy to lean back into for most everything. I have 3 committees. I have a incentive committee, I have a finance committee, and I have a property committee. And so I try to use those committees and help those folks, feel better about, and I bring staff in too. So they have the benefit of thinking about whatever it is themselves. And hopefully you've selected members on your EDA that bring some of that expertise to the table. But we also bring in city staff, and we try to look at things so that they feel comfortable, because they're liable to get stopped on the street at any time and have to talk to the press. Or in some cases, if it's confidential or it's something that's really hemmed up, I'll tell them to refer them back to me. So it's the history of how your EDA came about. How do you feel comfortable plugging into the EDA as you are there now? How do you see your role? Are there things you're comfortable with and things that maybe you're not, that you would want, give me a handbook. Let me know. I have a handbook for, I think Stephen helped us with that too. We have a handbook where all their contracts are in there, but my EDA does all kinds of things. And I use the word pilot program all the time, meaning if there's something that I need to get the attention of the constituents or the leadership, or something that's a best practice in economic development, I always can go to the EDA and get them to help fund it for a small period of time until we can get it out there. The EDA, like I said, they paid for the brand. They've got their own website. My website is opportunitylynchburg.com. I went out and looked at all the websites. We try to make that a resource, but we also try, Stephen hammers on me all the time, it needs to be a place where a site selector can go and figure out what's going on. Because let's face it, y'all, you know, if it's a site selector or anybody out there, they know you better than you know yourselves before they even land in your municipality.
Yeah.
So you can take risk, but also I would, you know, hopefully you have policies and different things in place. Now they need to be looked at and upgraded. I had covenants to I don't know if you all own any property or an industrial park or any of that, but my EDA has 2 industrial parks. They're almost all built out. They have, you know, tenants that have bought the property, but they had covenants on there where I think, you know, no telling. But we've just updated them.
Stephen,
Do we
can I
have
ask a
questions?
question? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to just say, let's ask questions. We can open it
So-
up for Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes for that.
Yeah. So it's 2 sort of practical questions for you. One is, how do you use your committee structure? Because I think that's an interesting idea that I hadn't heard. And then, does the EDA continue to have a separate, you know, bank account, all those sorts of
Yes.
things? And then, do they have their own staff, or is it city staff who support the EDA? Those are
It is city staff that supports the EDA. I'm staff to the EDA, and I have an administrative assistant who is staff. They still have their own attorney that comes to every meeting that is not the city attorney. They also have a CPA firm, and we have an audit done every year by another CPA firm. And all of that was facilitated by the fact that EDAs were really formed to do industrial revenue bonds. And right now, there aren't too many manufacturers that need an industrial revenue bond. But if you have hospitals and universities or, you know, nonprofits, those folks get a better interest rate using the EDA as a conduit for that. There's allowed in the Virginia statute, there's an amount of money that the EDA can charge to those for processing those bonds, and that money, right, is what would pay the attorney or the CPA or those types of things. And all of those that I mentioned are tax exempt. So I really say to them, this money that you're paying for this better interest rate, and we all know they wouldn't do it if it didn't net out at the end to be a better deal. But it's also their way, because they get their chops busted all the time. I don't know what y'all's is, but in Lynchburg, we're 25% tax exempt. Everybody else is picking up the tab for the rest of it, right? So that's their way of being able to give back. So the EDA has continued to have money. It leased property. It's built buildings for companies before and leased it back. So it's had its own funds there, but I'm slowly trying to turn the battleship around in a canal and put the onus back to some degree on the city for having incentive packages that are abatements where you don't really have a lot of, you know, cash doesn't change hands. Did I answer all of them? I'm sorry. Staff, me.
And then
the
subcommittees or the committees,
Okay.
like how do you use the committees?
The committees meet after every EDA meeting because it's hard enough for me to get the EDA members to remember to come to the meeting. They have to be televised. All the meetings are televised and they're put on our website. The committees meet immediately after the regular meeting so that they won't forget. And I bring to them whatever is relevant that then gets taken back to the full authority, you know, with the, you know, the recommendation. My committees cannot vote on anything. It's got to be the full authority. So, but what they do is they are agreeing. We put them on a committee, and unless they want to come off, they stay on that committee because I believe that when you get on the EDA, I hope you understand how important you are to the vitality, the economic vitality of your municipality. And I'm telling you, we have 4 3-year terms, and it takes every bit of that for them to become really, really comfortable with what can come across the desk. So those committees meet and then they make the recommendation back to the full authority.
Right. Okay. Other questions that Margette, you guys may have for Margette? Anybody? We've got time for maybe one more question. Frank, it looks like you unmuted. Did you unmute? Oh, Frank's got a question.
Yeah. What is the most significant thing that the EDA has done? What economic development initiative? And can you describe what did the EDA do? What did staff do? What did city council do to make the initiative a success?
Frank's coming in with a hard question. I like it.
Yeah, that's great, Frank. I will just I'll say that the EDA, they have done all incentives for every new prospect as well as existing business expansion for the last 20 years, right? And they do all of that without council having anything to do with that, because they don't have to go to council to ask for the funding to do the incentives. So they have done that. Like I said, they helped us with a strategic plan. The latest thing they've done is you all are kicking our butt and taking our name when it comes to air service in Charlottesville and in Roanoke. We only had American Airlines. And so the EDA, when you want another airline in your community, for the most part, you have to pay them to come there. And it's no different than any other incentive you do. When you give an incentive to a company, it should be you are helping them reduce the barrier to entry to your community. You're not making them rich. You're just giving them money that helps them lift off the ground there. And a lot of times you're doing it in conjunction with the state of Virginia at VEDP. So just recently, my EDA, not the companies in Lynchburg, but my EDA went in a closed room. I will consider that one of the greatest things ever. Is I couldn't even tell them the name of the airlines. And I said, we need more service here. I need a commitment. We got 30 days to turn this around, and we need $2 million in order to it. We need to encumber $2 million in order to do that. And so we now, starting March 24th, will have service that we haven't had since probably 2007 or 2008. Dulles to Lynchburg, Lynchburg to Chicago. Stephen will be so happy to hear that because he never flies anywhere near Lynchburg because you can't get in there. And he even told the airport director there one night, that's how he rolls, right? He didn't even know it was the airport director. Way to punt one, Stephen. Anyway, and then Chicago to Dulles and then back around. So I'm just saying that the number of things they've been involved in, the background you see behind me, the branding, the EDA paid for that. A website for the very first time for economic development separate from the city's website that you're buried down in. The EDA did that. The EDA pays for an internship program for Lynchburg interns at a tech company here that then turns around and hires them. So they give money to the schools. Lynchburg City Schools was having trouble keeping teachers, and the city couldn't handle it, and the school system couldn't handle it. So if you came in and lived in the city and were a new teacher here, they would give you a rent stipend for coming to the city. So they really go across the board. I've done 2 retail studies, because if you didn't know it, retail is some serious money if you have any kind of trust taxes, and it can help balance some of the things you're doing there. But if you're not strategic about the retail that comes there and you're not in that arena, you got to have a lot of things that work, just like you do for any other kind of prospect. But they help do all of those things. I mean, the list can go on, and I'm more than happy if you ever have a question. That's how economic development gets done. Is EDA members talk to each other. At Charlottesville, Chris Engel and Brian Schull from Harrisonburg and I, we do EDA talks at the industrial development authority class that VEDA has every year, because we are close together, but our EDAs are so very different. Like Chris, the city council funds all of the building purchases or the turnarounds or the bigger projects like that. The city funds all of that for him. Brian Schul in Harrisonburg, y'all, his EDA reports to the city attorney. So the city attorney is the staff. They still fulfill the same functions and they still have city staff, but it's so interesting how different the EDAs can be in a municipality. I mean, in different municipalities.
Thank you.
Okay. Other last questions, good thoughts? Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Margette. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you very, very much for sharing for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Margette.
Good luck, y'all.
Okay, y'all. We're running a little tight on time. So what I thought we would do, if it's okay, no breaks. I only have you for 2 hours. It's okay if you need to take a stretch break and or you need to hit the washroom. That's okay. Just feel free to do that. I'm curious to know a little bit about any takeaways that you have from speakers. Anything that you took away that was a key takeaway or note from the speakers that you'd want to share with the group. Something that you had sort of an aha moment maybe with as we were thinking about the work we're doing. Anyone?
I guess
No
I
less.
do.
Yeah,
I guess I
Bill.
do. Just the discussion about all the projects that you, I guess, Mr. Provo mentioned, as well as I've been to most of those places and had some kind of impact on them one way or the other, which is nice in terms of doing different studies. And so I'm very familiar with Chesterfield, Daleville, Allegheny Highlands, the Virginia Tech Research Park, Vinton Hill, Front Royal, all of those places actually, in Lynchburg as well, Ivy Creek Park out of the industrial complex. But they're very different. We have in terms of key properties, we have Rivanna Futures. What we have. So I still go back to some of the earlier discussions about wanting to reverse engineer, or either way, start with the inventory of what we've got to understand the potential impact, like what's our capacity from available resources like North Fork and Rivanna Futures and other sites that we've been privy to recently that are potentially developing for light ID industrial uses, as well as the potential. Anyway, just sort of that capacity analysis and how far can we really get with the resources we have, versus reversing engineering the desired effect, the tax base, et cetera, and then going back into what do we really need to make that happen. So anyway, that's all that, just reminded me of we like the data center thing. We don't really have good land for certain things. We have limited space to do it. So anyway, that's what it reminded me of, is the need to kind of understand, have an actual objective and mission to accomplish that's more, I guess, specific to infrastructure and resources. That's all.
Okay, good. Anything else? What else jumped out to you?
I'm still fairly new to this and trying to understand it all. It seems to me there are two different models that have been discussed. In Lynchburg, the EDA is fairly autonomous and independent of the city leadership, city council. As Margette described with Chris Engel, and I've heard Chris talk about this, in the city, the EDA is really a conduit. That was the word she used. A way to implement what city council wants to do. So it's two very different models of autonomous versus conduit. As I look at Albemarle County, am I correct that we are much closer to the conduit model?
I think so. Emily, how would you argue? What would you argue for that? I think it feels to me that that's the right structure. Lynch, I, I do think you're right about the Lynchburg model. They operate a little bit more autonomous. I did one of the real reasons I wanted them to, Margette, to come in and talk to us about was to show the breadth of the types of investment things that they are thinking about. So one of the things that makes the Lynchburg model, or what has made, I think, that EDA so successful, is that when there has been a gap, for instance, that the city can't fund something or funding's not there and or it's a bit more risky, the EDA has been able to take on that risk to support the economic development efforts. They've also made big strategic investments to support the work as well. But Frank, I think you're right. I think you are much more aligned, and you're not as autonomous as the Lynchburg model. But there are still, I think, some lessons to be taken even from that as well. Emily, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think to date, the Albemarle EDA has been more similar to the Charlottesville model as more of a conduit. But that being said, I think in the past year, the EDA has expressed its intent to exercise some more of the special powers that you all have. And I think, that came up during the MOU discussion with the Board of Supervisors about a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And the board was supportive of that. Of the EDA, taking on a little bit more of a strategic, proactive stance on things.
Yeah. So a little bit leaning even a little bit less out of that conduit role, but a little still in that conduit role, right? But also having the opportunity to talk about what are some things that strategically we want to do and go forward with. One of the takeaways I took out of this, and look, you guys are a small group, and EDA in Lynchburg is small as well. But I thought the committee structure that Marge has put in place is an interesting one as well, where they have outlined and kind of put their work together, and certain directors have become, I wouldn't say specialists in that space, but have become the conduit or the go-to people around that space. I think that's something that may be worthwhile that you all should think about as well. Like, do you have a group of folks that work on or think about advise on incentives? Is there a group of stuff that are advising on property development? Is there a group of folks that are advising on other kind of strategic initiatives? Emily comes to you and says, like, we need a new website to support the work because we can't get that from the county. Those are maybe that to me is something that is possibly worthwhile. Or is there an initiative that's a little bit outside of the box, so to speak? Bye, B. Good luck. Enjoy the spelling bee. Other thoughts? So what I'd like to do now is spend a little bit of time
we have a hand. We have a hand.
I did not see it. Let's do it.
It was late. I apologize for that. One of the things that Margette talked about and that we do, but I don't know if it can be consistently done, was she made the phrase about competing on an international scale. And we know with AstraZeneca, we've done that. And not to say that we need to find the next AstraZeneca, which if we did would be amazing, but what, with our proximity to so many places, right? We are close enough to DC. We are close enough to the Port of Virginia. How can we look internationally so we're not necessarily doing some of the stuff that's been done in the past, right? I think we've talked about sort of, the World Strides of the world and the Martha Jeffersons of the world. Where it's, it's come from the county and gone to the city or gone the other way, right? How do we grow the pie locally and not just so that's where I'm going with, and it's not just international, but the fact that she mentioned competing internationally struck me, but competing against the Research Triangle area, that sort of thing, right? We've got some opportunities here, I think, and I don't know the best way to. I don't know what Emily and the staff are doing to make that known in Richmond and points beyond, but but that was a thing that caught my attention.
Yep. And those, I think that gets to this idea of something that's a bit more catalytic, right? That's a little bit outside of the box to maybe change the trajectory of economic development for the county. I guess so. Emily, I'm going to put you on the spot, on the hot seat. I'm curious, as you now are. So we're going to kind of move into this conversation of starting to identify like what is a framework by how the EDA should be thinking about investment ideas. And if we are thinking about what is the role of the EDA and how can the EDA kind of support the work that Emily and team is doing, I was just generating some and lens or discussion points about this. And again, we'd want to think about these and talk through these. But one would be investments that the EDA has to be, there's got to be strategic alignment as it relates to the strategic plan, right? We went through a strategy process for a reason. We've went through a business planning process of the reason to kind of support that work. And so clearly anything that gets invested in terms of the EDA, there's got to be strategic alignment with that work, partly because it's been aligned with the Board of Supervisors. The second, and these are, by the way, these are Stephen Pettigo's criteria, and then I'm going to put Emily on the spot to kind of react to these, and then open it up for others. The second being that what you guys are doing, and David, I think this gets to your point, is that the EDA and the role of the EDA is not maybe to support everyday economic development work, right? And what I mean by that, it's not to support the need to do a site trip to a trade show, or we need a little bit of money to do this type of marketing. But stuff that the EDA wants to do should have some catalytic value to it, right? So it should be somewhat transformational. So the idea that so an idea could be, for instance, we've got our 3 growth sectors, and the EDA really wants to be catalytic, and so we're gonna invest in an opportunity to build out a real FDI plan, an international foreign direct investment plan. That to me is catalytic. It's strategically aligned with the plan. It's not something that the staff is already doing, but it is something that could be transformational to the work that we're doing. See where I'm going with this? Connecting these two. Third idea for me is it's got to have some return on economic impact. So I think one of the things that Margette mentioned, and I think this is really true with the work that you're doing, and now that you guys have Saboon with you and others who kind of has got the data chops to support this, and I know some of the stuff that Avery does as well, is that there's got to be a return on investment. So if we're making investments, what's the economic impact or what's the economic return on this? Now we can get to the point of modeling those types of things out now to understand if we do an international plan and it attracts these types of investments, what would be these dollars? Then we're able to not only say it's aligned, it's catalytic, but it also has economic impact. And then the fourth kind of way that I think about this is there's got to be a real independent role that the EDA is playing, right? As opposed to what the county would do or what the partners would do. So, when I think about framework of work going forward and we look at the economic development plan, yes, we could I think Emily and team could probably come to you and say, as we look at the plan, here are a list of 8 to 12 things that we think could be changing for the future going forward. But it feels to me that there's got to be some framework about how we think about these. And these may be 4 principles that start to maybe guide that work. So I'll stop. I'm kamikazing Emily with this a little bit, but as I think about the work and thinking about the role that you all play, we're starting to outline, yes, you have that MOU with the Board of Supervisors. Yes, you're wanting to take on some more autonomy, but here are the types of things that we would do. And here's the principles of what we would do. And this is why we do it. And anytime something that comes before the EDA as an investment opportunity, you'd ask these 4 questions. So I'll stop. And Emily, you've got thoughts or comments for the group.
I so want to hear the group's thoughts and comments.
Okay.
How's
so
that
punting.
for a punt?
She's punting. She's punting.
Way to get out front on that one, Emily. So I'll share my thoughts first. I guess as chair, I should do it last, but I'm going to just go ahead and do it. For me, the things that I've been thinking about are, we have obviously gotten really good support from the Board of Supervisors. They've provided lots of money for lots of projects. So I think, we have money. We've obviously made our contribution to the road, but, it is constrained in that it's built up over a long period of time. So we don't necessarily have, big annual increases going into the funds that we control. So I think I like what Margette said, maybe smaller things that are, projects that we're going to start and see whether they work. And, maybe things that the county wouldn't necessarily invest in, with it strategically aligned, but not necessarily something the county would want to put their money out there, more risky. Although I also think because we've got smaller amounts of money, I'd want at least there to be an opportunity to recoup those funds. Now we may say if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it's not less of a sort of grant making thing where here's the money and we don't expect anything to come back, but more programs where we can invest, but there's some opportunity to get some return there. And I think that's where I see it within, we've got now a plan that says, here's the things we want to invest in, but really what is those lanes? The other part that I think we'll do, but probably needs less sort of planning on our part, is as the big project like AstraZeneca comes into place, some of the special powers that we've got will get used in one way or another, whether it's land flows through us, we do leasing, those sorts of things. But I think that'll really come through the process as we go along, just in what we do. I think that's sort of my thoughts.
Okay, I love that. I'm just adding to, you guys can see I'm just adding a list here. We'll kind of refine and think through that list. So Dave went. Frank, I'm gonna just call on people because I'm a faculty perp nerd and that's what I do. So Frank, you're up next. What's your thoughts?
I hope this is related to the question, but I'm not sure.
That's okay.
I was quite interested when Margette described the issue of their teachers being unable to afford to live in the city. Obviously, we have a similar problem in Albemarle County with teachers, firemen, policemen, etc. And she described how the EDA, if I understood her right, provided funding to provide rent supplements of some sort. Now, it strikes me an initiative like that is going to take a lot of money to make any difference. I mean, way beyond what we have at the EDA. So if we recognize that's a problem, can the role of the EDA be to convene others to try to address a problem where we don't have the resources to solve it, but we bring together those who might have resources and might be interested in solving a problem. And so we provide, it's your catalytic word, that we're a convener to address problems that are critical to economic development. Does that make sense as a role for us when the truth is we don't have enough money to solve most problems?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's an interesting, you can at least be the catalyst or the convener of maybe those around the business community, right? This idea that you could be the voice for that private sector group or other independent, foundations and other stuff to maybe think about that. I like that idea. I think you'd want to think through how you're selective in terms of how often you do that convening work, given the fact that you're staffed by the department and you guys are all volunteers, but that could absolutely be a role. I think about the idea of the teacher thing, that you're right. It's not something you could do, but is there a little prototype of something that you could do to show demonstration, right? Those are other ways to think about that. I think that really leans into what Don is suggesting as well about the idea of prototyping. I love that. I'll go to David next. David.
Helps if I come off of mute. I like the idea of these prototypes, right? And at Lexis, we call them bets, right? You make a series of small bets, you know, and you make a number of them to see what works, what doesn't work. Not all of them are going to pay off, right? I don't want to turn away, you know, the honey refiners of Albemarle County, or the pizza makers, right? Right. We want those, right? We want to grow those businesses because everybody's got to start somewhere. And so we need to have that ability to, even if the direct return on investment isn't big. Another piece that is not in our it's not in our strategic plan, really, right? Home Depot wasn't in our strategic plan, but as a catalyst for redevelopment of a parcel where we've got limited commercial or light industrial space, I think it was important to do. And so I want to be able to continue those types of opportunities, right? If Home Depot comes back to us and says, we've got a great opportunity to redevelop the rest of Fashion Square Mall, I want to hear it. I want to know what that return on economic impact is going to be. I want to know what that data is. And so, so those are the types of things that I'm looking at. I was trying to look at Lynchburg's annual report to find their budget. I didn't get there yet. But some of those are the areas where I'd like to see us being able to make sure that we're aggressive. So
yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, that makes complete sense. And I think, you know, one of the things that you do, and the reason you develop this kind of criteria is it's obviously on Emily and team to be able to come to you. I mean, one of the things I think you can see with Margette and the EDA is that she's serving as the conductor of the symphony a little bit, so to speak, right? She's coming to the EDA and saying, here are the things that we should be thinking about. Emily is your conductor, right? Which is to say, if we are thinking about the strategic plan and the business plan going forward, it's not incumbent upon you as the EDA members to say, here, you know, here are the things that we're doing. It is Emily's role as the director and kind of lead and kind of the thought leader for us to say, hey, EDA, here are some opportunities for us. And by having this type of criteria in front of us, I think it helps to inform the types of things that Emily is able to bring forward to the EDA for consideration. Emily, does that make sense for you?
Yeah, it does. And I wonder if I can sneak back into the speaking line to get a reaction from the full EDA, but sort of trying to triangulate Dawn and Bill's comments with sort of a test, you know, like, do you think it would, like, a good pilot effort that the EDA would be interested in supporting that might not have a direct ROI? So this is where I'm trying to test Chair Long's thoughts. You know, we know that we have the remaining portion of Ravenna Futures. We know that North Fork has some property left, but we don't necessarily know where the next property is. And so, you know, there's a level of analysis that we could do where we would work with engineering resources to evaluate sort of what are those next good opportunity sites in Albemarle County. And then we could start to think of, okay, like, let's build a plan for how might we engage the property owner to, you know, try to position that site competitively with the types of prospects that we're seeing. Is that an example of something that the EDA would be interested in diving into, or is that's not quite right?
EDA, what do you think, David and Frank?
I'll go. I think the idea of land banking, that was one of the notes I took, right? This would ultimately maybe lead to a land banking, a use of those special powers, right? The return on investment may not be instant, right? Nobody expected the Ravenna Futures return on investment in the fewer than 5 years that we had it. unless they were really clairvoyant, in which case we need to talk to them about other things. So I like that idea. I think there are options and opportunities as well to engage other parts of county government there, Emily. One of the things that we're facing is the potential need for a comprehensive high school, which requires between 50 and 70 acres. And they're doing the same sort of look at land that you're talking about doing. What's the next parcel? And we don't want to necessarily compete with them, but we're also identifying sort of the same things, right? Because transportation's an issue, topography is an issue, access to water and sewer are issues, right? These are all the same things. And we don't want to necessarily, the schools are important because they drive the quality of life that wants to bring people here to do business. But on the other hand, we don't want to compete with them to bid on parcels and drive up the cost, which is great for a landowner, but not great for the county and the taxpayers of the county. So I think there's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity here. And I don't know how to fully embrace it for the best, right? And this is what somebody was saying, right? That we look at it from the best overall import without politics for the people of Albemarle County. And I'm not sure the best way to get there, but I think it's possible. I like the idea, Emily.
So y'all, I know we've still got about 10 more minutes or so before, and I will make sure we're done in time, but I do want to give Steve an opportunity. So Emily, let me stop here. Steve, Emily, did you get a response to your question? Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a simple response. Yes, I think it's a good idea, Emily.
There it is.
That's what we like about you, Frank. Direct and to the point. One word answer.
So Steve, I'll give you the last kind of opportunity to kind of react to this.
Okay, thank you. So I was thinking about when we brought DIA down and I was running NJIC and I brought the Board of Supervisors over in 3 two-person tranches, of course. And I could tell them specifically how many people DIA, how many humans were going to move from Washington area to Charlottesville definitively and what their pay grades would be. And then the Board of Supervisors obviously could extrapolate how that would benefit the county and so forth economically. I'm not sure, and maybe I'm just, backseat student, that we've done an adequate job of the impact of AstraZeneca, because all of defense is 1.2 for the county, as I understand it. AstraZeneca will be 4 billion. I mean, do we know all the ancillary effects, people coming down, just all the goodness that we'll have to work through? I just don't know. And I'm certainly not calling for more committees and more meetings. But I contradict myself. Perhaps if there's one committee that we could theoretically stand up is something to study that specifically, and that we have, provided the Board of Supervisors as much information and help them as best we can to have the county prepared for a $4 billion inject, which is 3 times what defense is. So it's going to be massive. And I don't know. I mean, again, maybe I'm behind the times. I don't know if we've done that degree of specificity and that we know, okay, here are the steps we're going to have to do to get like high schools, like whatever, that are going to be a requirement when people, and I don't know the exact number, people will come here, new people, tax base, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. Maybe I just haven't been paying attention, Emily. So I have to fire me, but I am Don's deputy now, so remember that. It's like a job at church. It's for life. So anyway, so I don't know if we've done that yet, and I just think that might be time well spent.
Okay. So in terms of so thanks for this. So in terms of next steps, here's what I'd like to suggest. Here's our path forward, maybe.
Hey, Stephen, before we do that, I wonder if Andrew was having some technical, but I just want to
is he
make sure
back?
I want to
He's
make
back.
sure he has an opportunity to.
I thought he ditched out of the party. That's why he was on my list. And then I was like,
He went to the spelling bee too.
Yeah, I was gonna
Andrew, you get
I
you
was
get the
gonna
last word, and
participate.
then I will wrap us up. How's
He,
that?
Oh,
he already got eliminated.
Yes, right.
jeez, yeah, short lived.
You're telling him he's chair of the new subcommittee, right?
Exactly. He's ideal for that.
The subcommittee on choosing committees. I'm in. Yeah, I think the data center thing brings a lot to mind. I know, Steve, you don't want to go back to data centers, but I do think you talk about how do you advertise, how do you attract the next AstraZeneca, and I think anytime show is closed off to investment, whether that's like a specific investment or what, I think that is less attractive to all investment in my mind. So I think how you can show positivity. You talked about being the next research triangle. I'm actually in Raleigh right now, and I think you look at the pros of being in Charlottesville compared to the cons of being in Raleigh in the nicest way possible,
No
or
doubt.
in Albemarle County. And so I think you say, hey, like if you want to go 45 minutes, you're actually going to go someplace and not halfway across town. I think that's the story you can tell. So I think being positive and putting the best foot forward out to sort of into the ether in a way is how you attract that company that you didn't know was looking for you, that lands on your doorstep.
Mm-hmm. So thanks for that. So here's what I'd love to do to propose kind of a next step is that, so we've obviously, you guys will see the business plan that Emily and team has been working on. That will be in your packets, this next thing. What I would love to do is I'll take this conversation today and our conversation about a framework about how do we think about investment. And Emily, maybe you'll throw me that Board of Supervisors memo too, where I can have that as reference. And what I will do is just draft a framework, right? Maybe for you guys to think about how you should be, what are the things, what would be our decision making, our framework for how the EDA would be invest. And I'll share that as a draft to you guys, and you guys can start to think about that as some guiding principles. As a first step about how to start to advance work forward. And then I think once you land on those guiding principles, then the kind of next step would be to take a look at for Emily and team to say, let's look at the strategic plan, and here are 3 or 4 proposal ideas or things that are coming in the pipeline that we could start to consider as opportunities for the EDA to have a presence. That's sort of my thinking on this. Emily, does that align with your thinking? Someone needs to help
Sorry.
her.
Yes.
Okay, great.
None of my peripherals are connecting to my laptop, so I am also challenged today.
Okay. So we'll do that. That'll be the next step, and then you guys can react to it. So now we've had a good discussion. Now I can spend some time doing that, putting together a little bit of a framework for that, and I'll share that when we share the business plan, and you guys can react to that.
Yeah, just so you know, I mean, we've got some time, I think, at the February meeting if we needed to, depending on what maybe that's the chance to just talk about the business plan or get initial thoughts on that. And then we can obviously put time on the later agendas at whatever point we need.
Yep, for sure. Okay. Thanks so much. Hope you guys found this to be somewhat interesting and helpful.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, bye, friends.
All right. Anything else? Anybody on the board has? All right. Well, then I guess we'll be adjourned. Thanks for everybody and for all the work, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, guys.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Stay warm. Stay warm.